Hello. Today I wanted to take some time to talk about a book I just finished reading, Beowulf. I don't know if you can see that. Oh, the lighting is pretty bad. I'm filming this like later at night, so I don't have the nice natural light coming in from the window. But anyways, so just finished reading this today, and this will have spoilers in it. Okay, I'm going to summarize the book for you. Now, one of the things that people often talk about after reading Beowulf is, of course, to contrast the pagan culture being depicted in the book versus maybe like a Christian version of those ethics. So in Beowulf, the society is based off of honor and glory, and a man is only valued insofar as he is useful in combat, and all of the wonderful things that a person achieves in their life is due to the monsters they slay or the armies that they defeat, right? This is one of the most prominent themes in Beowulf, right? Like, there is no glory without difficulty or struggle. That is not what I'm going to be talking about in this video. There's tons of other videos on that. You can go watch someone else. Instead, what I wanted to focus on is this concept of the weird. And kind of reads out of place when I read this for the first time. It seems out of place. So yeah, I want to go over that concept. But to back up a little bit, Beowulf is a poem that was written down or composed, I suppose. It says on the back cover here, in the 8th century, so it's quite old. The setting, however, is a little earlier. It's in the 5th century in Scandinavia. So just to give you a bit of history, I guess, on that, this is part of the Anglo-Saxon tradition, right? The Anglo-Saxons originated when Germanic settlers crossed over from mainland Europe into England in the 5th century, and they lived around until the 10th century, until the Norman conquest, and they spoke Old English, right? So Beowulf was written originally, spoken, composed orally, and then was written down in Old English. Just to summarize the book quickly, and here's where the spoilers will be, but there's this guy named Beowulf. He's of the race of the Geats. I think I'm saying that right. The Geats. He sails over after hearing that another nation across the sea is having some problems with a monster named Grendel. So he sails over there with his men. He single-handedly defeats Grendel with his bare hands, no sword or anything like that. And he earns the glory. And then Grendel's mom comes and kills more guys, and so he's like, oh my goodness, we gotta kill Grendel's mom, and he ends up going down into like this deep sea lair where he fights her. Now, I saw a few other videos that were talking about this, and this is not what the video's about, so I don't want to harp on it too long. And also there's an animated movie from 2007 called Beowulf where it also touches on this, and that's the idea that there's some sort of like sexual component to Beowulf's fight with Grendel's mother. I didn't read that in the text. I don't have the reference here, but essentially when I read it, it just talked about how, he falls on his back and she's trying to like stab him with a dagger, and but his chainmail protects him. That's the... I couldn't find anywhere where there's some sort of like sexual temptation element to that fight. So anyways, I'd like to hear someone's opinion on that's read the book as well. Again, I feel like that's kind of reading into the text too much. I didn't get that from it. Anyways, so after he defeats Grendel's mother, what happens next is... Sorry, my computer just turned off here. What happens next is he gets all the treasure, the king, or the king, I suppose, in that area says thank you. He sails back to his motherland, and then eventually the king dies. The king's son dies. He gets the kingship. He gets control over that area that he came from. So he's the king. He rules for 50 years. He's a good king. He is the strongest, and no one can beat him. And in his old age, which he must be like 70 something by this point, there's a dragon that takes over a hoard of cursed gold in the area, and some servant accidentally steals a cup, and the dragon goes on a killing spree, killing a lot of the people in his village, or I don't know, they call them like mead halls, mead being like beer, like drinking hall. I don't know what it's called, their kingdom. And so he takes some of his best men and he suits up for battle, and he makes this shield out of all metal so he can defend the fiery breath of the dragon that would normally burn a wooden shield. And then he fights the dragon, and he ends up like getting knocked down, and then all the men flee, but one man returns to help him named Wiglaf, and together Wiglaf and Beowulf kill the dragon. And then, Beowulf has some speech and then he dies, and then that's kind of the history of Beowulf. That's the end of the story. Now, another interesting thing to note about the contrast, I suppose, between pagan times and like Christianized like way of looking at the world would be that Beowulf is written by a Christian narrator about pre-Christian or pagan times. So we get this dichotomy, this tension between two different value systems or ways of seeing the world. So now I said at the beginning of the video that I wanted to talk about the concept of weird. Now, this is an older word. It's an Anglo-Saxon word, right? And it's spelled W-Y-R-D, which is more true to the Anglo-Saxon. Now, in my translation of Beowulf, it's actually spelled like the English word weird, W-E-I-R-D, right? Now, an interesting little connection there is if you are familiar at all with Greek mythology, the three fates in Greek mythology that kind of determine someone's life, those are also called the Weird Sisters. Now, why are they called the Weird Sisters? I mean, maybe in Percy Jackson they're depicted as maybe a bit strange. I don't know. But actually the reason they're called the Weird Sisters is because this root word weird connects back to this idea of fate or destiny, which is what it sort of implies. Now, people have different notions in their head about fate and destiny. We'll talk a little bit more about what weird actually specifically means. But yeah, just quickly touching on the three weird sisters in Greek mythology, also called the Moirai. I don't know, I'm not saying that right. But anyways, we have there's three of them, right? Clotho, which is the spinner that kind of creates life, right? Or the thread of life, right? So she's the goddess or deity that's called upon in the 9th month of pregnancy when a baby is born in Greek culture, right? Because she's the one that creates the life, right? Spinning the thread. And then you also have Lachesis. I don't know, I'm probably not saying that right either. She's the one that is allotting the length of the string, how long someone's going to live. And then you have Atropos, which is the kind of the ugly old hag with the shears that kills people, right? It cuts the thread. Now, this concept of weird, and it can't be exactly equated to like destiny or fate, because when people think of destiny or fate, they think of something inevitable, right? Like Agent Smith in The Matrix. I am inevitable. When really this is not exactly the case. It's more so a string of causes, right? The way that circumstances kind of pile together to create a certain situation that's most likely gonna result in a certain outcome. However, and Beowulf has quotes on this we'll get to, they're quite clear that a man can exercise free will to oppose the weird and kind of go against it and change it. So there isn't this exact this clear-cut line between like it's completely inevitable. It's more so an interplay. I didn't write notes on this, but it's calling back to memory this scene in Moby Dick, right, where he's weaving the sword mat on the boat, and Melville has this intricate metaphor between free will and fate, and they're weaving together on the sword mat. Anyways, yeah, so it's more complicated than just something being inevitable or completely predestined. Now, by my count, there are 11 instances of the concept of the weird in Beowulf. I went through it. with a fine-toothed comb. No, not quite as fine as I should have, but yeah, so I just wanted to go and read through some of them so you can get like a better sense of how the concept is actually utilized in the book. So again, not covering the concept as a whole, but as it appears specifically in Beowulf. So my copy, annoyingly enough, doesn't provide exact line numbers. It just provides line numbers like at the top, like a range. So I don't know the exact line number that these are appearing on, or else I would tell you so you could follow along. I'll just give the page numbers because that's the best I could do with this. I mean, I guess I could read you the range. That's not that very helpful. Anyways, first one's on page 65. Now in my translation, this instance is not actually saying the word weird. However, in some translations they do use the word. So it's in this section I think it's translated as fate, but again, same thing for translation purposes. Anyways, so for this one it reads. Just give me a second here. I have to find it. 65. Of course, now I know it's on the page, but oh, here it is. Haha. So it says it's kind of more of a quip. It's not really like that deep. It just says the Queen of Warcoats, it is the bequest of Hrethel and the Forge of the Wayland. Fate will take its course. So kind of more of like a saying, I guess, that would be familiar to the audience back in the times. Fate will take its course, or weird will take its course, right? So taking this quote alone, it seems like weird might be inevitable, just based on this one line, but we'll see, of course, that it is not, like I was saying previously. Now, also on here, we'll get into a little bit more later, is this contrast between this pagan concept of the weird and the Christian concept of fate, if there is one. Now, we'll get into this, like I said, more later, but Christianity, it seems to me, doesn't really have the same notion of fate. There's Bible verses we'll talk about in a minute that more so focus in on God's plan for the world as well as free will. And those are kind of the two interacting forces that create events in the world. God's will and our will, and how those interact. There isn't really this concept of like fate or the stars or weird, right? But we have a little quote on it right above the thing I just read, talking a little bit about it. So it says, with bare hands shall I grapple with the fiend, fight to the death here, hater and hated. He who is chosen shall deliver himself to the Lord's judgment. So it's talking about obviously some form of like predestination, right? He who is chosen. But then it also talks about free will, shall deliver himself. Now, maybe I'm reading that into the book, but it seems like there's sort of this interplay between the two. So yeah. Now the next one is a page later, page 66. This one does actually use the word weird. Oh, computer keeps turning off. Now, here it is. My hall companions, my warband are dwindled. Weird has swept them into the power of Grendel. Right, so here weird is talking about fate. Fate has swept my companions into the power of Grendel, the monster. So again, that for the most part, translating the word weird as fate does work. A couple pages later, page 69, we have again another quip, another saying that would have been familiar to the audience. It says, "Weird saves oft the man undoomed if he undaunted be." So he's saying that if the man is not doomed by fate, his courage can save him in a situation. So kind of highlighting the role of free will, right? Maybe 10 pages later here-ish, not quite, 5 pages, on page 74. This, in my translation for this one, doesn't use the word weird, but the concept is there. It says, he's talking about Grendel. Grendel wants to eat everybody, all the men. So he, being Grendel, he meant to wrench the life from each body that lay in the place before night was done. It was not meant to be, or it was not to be. He was no longer to feast on the flesh of mankind after that night. So it was not to be, right? Again, the concept of weird coming up. And in some translations, yeah, it does use the word weird in that situation. 84 here, so 10 pages later, it says, here we go, I think he, in this case being Hrothgar, he bade compensation to be made too in gold for the man whom Grendel had horribly murdered. So one of the unfortunate men that was killed. More would have gone had not the god overseeing us, and the resolve of a man stood against this weird. So here, we are seeing that fate and the circumstance and the situation is leading up to some event, and yet both God and the resolve of a man are going against that situation and creating something different from it. So here, we're in this passage especially, we're seeing the interplay between circumstance, our free will, and God's will. So this is probably one of the best ones, I'd say. More would have gone had not the God overseeing us and the resolve of a man stood against this weird, this fate. Just need a drink of water here. This next one, 5 pages later, page 89, it says, there's only so many words on the page and I can't find it right away. Maybe I need stronger glasses. Or maybe I need to take my glasses off. How is it possible? Here we go. So this is talking about some guy, some warrior. I can't tell. I'd have to read back a little bit more to figure out who. It's talking about, Hygelac the Great. Am I saying that right? No, the Great, the Geat. Of course, being of the same race or people as Beowulf. Hygelac the Great, the Geat. I did it again. The Geat, as he stood before the standard astride his plunder, defending his war hall, weird struck him down, and in his superb pride he provoked disaster in the Frisian feud. So again, in this case, he's being struck down by fate. Page 90, a page later. Can I find it? I should have, I don't like marking up my books or annotating them that much. I don't know why. Maybe I'll start doing it at some point. But if I was more comfortable annotating my book, I would have just circled these references. But who knows? Come on. Here we go. It's at the top. So this is talking about Grendel's mother. And, this is right before Grendel's mother comes back, and it's talking about the wife of the hosting king. Now I'm forgetting her name. But she was tending to the men after the night with Grendel, and it says she walked back to her place. What a banquet that was! The men drank their wine, the weird they did not know, destined from of old, the doom that was to fall on many of the earls there. So it almost seems as though the weird doesn't just refer to circumstance, it almost refers to like negative circumstance, like things that happen that are bad, because it says that they were having tons of fun and joy at this banquet, and they did not know. So they in that time they were not influenced by this negative sense of doom or fate. Next reference, 37 pages later. We're on 127 now, so a bit later. It's possible I missed some references in there, but we got most of them. Can I be quick on this one? I cannot. This one, yeah, no, it is. Sorry, guys. Bear with me here. How many times do I have to skim it before I can find this word? Found it. It's in the middle, of course, hard to find. Again, in this one, we also have this connotation of the weird being something negative, like doom, as opposed to just fate. So it says here, gloomy was his spirit, though, death-eager, wandering. The weird was at hand, that was to overcome the old man there, seek his soul's hoard, and separate the life from the body. Not for long now would the atheling's life be trapped in flesh. So here, the weird is like circumstance, but the weird is almost embodied by the monsters in the book, right? Like Grendel and Grendel's mother are almost, and the dragon at the end, are almost bereft of free will. They don't have free will. And so as such, they are literally agents of fate. They're agents of the weird. So that's, I think, why there's like negative connotation, because here the weird is referring to the dragon who's going to try to kill Beowulf. So it says the weird was at hand to overcome the old man there. Yeah. Again, same concept. It's like, come on. I've said it a lot of times. It's fate. But by providing these references, I hope to show that it's not purely like an inevitable sense of fate. There's more going on. And I should have starred that good one. I think it was on page 84. We'll come back to it. Anyways, a couple more here. A few pages later, 131. And I'm fast on this one. I found it already. So it says, from the keeper of the barrow, being the dragon, I believe, from the keeper of the barrow I shall not flee 1 foot, but further than that shall be worked out at the wall as weird shall decide for us. Every man's master. So here it's talking about weird as every man's master. Again, if you took this by itself, you would think that the weird perhaps is inevitable, right? But based on the previous passages, we know that's not the case. But again, here it's referred to every man's master, even though it can be defied. So interesting. A couple more. 132, the next page over. This one also does not have the word weird. It's translated differently in my copy. So let's see, it might take me longer to find it. Ah, here it is, yeah. So it says, for the famous prince, the protection lent to his life and person by the shield was shorter than he had shaped it to be. He must now dispute this space of time, the first in his life when fate had not assigned him the glory of the battle. So usually fate assigns him the glory of the battle. Now this time he's getting the short end of the straw, or short end of the stick. I don't know what the saying is. Anyways, just kind of showing how circumstance sometimes goes your way, sometimes it doesn't. Last one here on page 140. And I'm going to be fast on this one. Yes, I am. So here it's talking about, Beowulf's talking about his ancestors and how they've all been led to die by fate. So it says, Beowulf's talking to Wiglaf, I believe, and he says, "You are the last man left of our kindred, the house of the Waymundings. Weird has lured each of my family to his fated end. Each earl through his valor, I must follow them." So Weird, or fate, has lured each of his family to their fated end, or to their death. Okay, now that's all of the references to the weird in Beowulf. Perhaps we should go back to the one on page, I think it was one in page 84, where, yeah, it is. This is the important one. I'm going to star this one here, because this is the one where it talks about sort of the interplay between circumstance, God's will, and man's will, and that's kind of what I want to dig deeper into. I'll read it one more time. It says, he bade compensation to be made too in gold for the man whom Grendel had horribly murdered. More would have gone had not the God overseeing us and the resolve of a man stood against this weird, stood against fate, right? So now I want to talk a little bit more about fate in the Bible, and I said previously that I don't really think there is a huge emphasis on the concept of fate in the Bible, just because it mostly focuses on God's will and our will and how those two things interact to create the events that occur in the world, right? So I have some verses here. First one being Ephesians 2:10, and I have bookmarks, so hopefully it's a little faster than finding the page numbers like last time. Ephesians 2:10. So it says, I'm reading from NIV today. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. So this one makes it seem as though it's just God's will that's making things happen. Now we have Romans 20, or sorry, Romans, there's no Romans 28, is there? I don't think so. How long is Romans? I should know that. Now I'm going off on a rabbit trail. I knew it. Romans only goes up to 16. There's no Romans 20. This verse is Romans 8, 29 to 30. And it says, For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. Sorry. Verse 30, And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. Again, I'm not sure if I planned well. I don't know if I found verses that emphasize the free will of the individual. Of course, this is not something that really needs to be found or supported by the text. This is just common knowledge. Of course, many times we are called to take up our cross and follow Jesus, or do the right thing, right? There are 10 commandments for a reason, because we have a choice to follow them, right? So I didn't pick any verses for free will, but I have one more here about God's will, and this comes from Isaiah 48:5 or 3. I can't read my own writing. Isaiah 48:5. Therefore I told you these things long ago. Before they happened, I announced them to you. Right? So again, kind of God knowing in advance what will happen, being omniscient. And existing outside of time. So the notion that I get is that if you understand the concept of the weird as a string of causes, or like circumstance that just comes together, it seems to be consistent both with the Beowulf and the way it works in Beowulf, and also in the Bible, right? Although the Bible doesn't really focus on fate, and I think that if you tend to focus on fate a lot, you're kind of, even if you take it in the correct definition as just a string of causes creating a circumstance, you're kind of focusing on the wrong thing. The Bible wants, or God wants us to focus on his will and our will and how those interplay, but I don't necessarily think that the concept of weird is contrary to the Bible, so long as you take it not as inevitable, but rather as just the way that circumstances come together to create a certain event, or the likelihood of a certain event. That I don't think is heretical. I think that can jive with Christianity, but again, you shouldn't be focusing on it too much, in my opinion. So anyways, I also just found it interesting that the word weird is weird. Like, to me, that's interesting, because sometimes the way circumstances come together can be weird. Anyways, that's all for today. Have a good one.